Notes from the Underground, Episode 1. The Economy is Rigged, the Ins and Outs of Economic Austerity. We were raised to believe that if you worked hard enough, you will be okay, and that those who fall through the cracks of society did so because of their own moral failings. We were taught to blame the vulnerable for being weak. We were indoctrinated into a philosophy that benefits a minority of people who routinely act in amoral and awful ways for power and profit. These were lies to keep the majority from overthrowing the status quo and to permit a rigged economy to survive. The economy has been rigged for a long time. It was rigged on purpose after World War I to protect the class-based capital order from a more equitable and democratic distribution of resources through economic austerity. Economic austerity is the tool by which the economy is rigged, and unlike the dictionary definition of austerity, it is quite complex in theory, practice, and outcomes. And here we will attempt to explain it simply. The theory behind economic austerity is based on the idea that wealth is wasted on the average person because the average person will not use their wealth appropriately. This idea believes that the average person will waste their wealth on trivial objects like food, shelter, and entertainment, instead of important things like building more wealth. Thus, the wealth of the average person must be taken from them and given to people who will use this wealth to build more wealth. This theory was developed even though World War I and its controlled economy showed this theory to be false before it was put into words and practice as economic austerity. It was developed because of the crisis of capitalism the controlled economy created. This scheme was engineered to protect the wealth and power of the few. It was created by capitalists and their minions to protect the wealth of capitalists from democracy, a flatter wealth distribution, and growing labor power. This growing labor power, with its positive effects on society and for the average person, called into question capital accumulation in the class-based system of capitalism for the first time in the history of capitalism. The capitalists rightly considered this a direct threat to their power and lifestyle, since economic austerity was developed and implemented shortly after World War I. It has been used globally to maintain capitalism and keep it safe from other economic theories. Economic austerity works on several levels that can be put into three broad categories. These are fiscal austerity, monetary austerity, and industrial austerity. Fiscal austerity is the type of austerity that most people know because it is commonly discussed by politicians and media pundits. It involves reducing government spending, usually on programs aimed at providing social services such as education, health care, income support, housing, and more. Fiscal austerity also uses regressive taxation instead of progressive taxation. Regressive taxation is flat taxes like a sales tax, or decreasing taxes on those who make the most. Decreasing the taxes on those who make the most has real-world outcomes, with billionaires paying less taxes than nurses and construction workers. Progressive taxation would tax those who have the highest incomes and the highest wealth more than those who have less wealth and less income. Monetary austerity is also relatively well known, if less commonly discussed and implemented. It is mostly used when labor power begins to recover. Under monetary austerity, access to liquidity and credit is restricted when labor markets get tight and wages start to rise. Liquidity refers to how easy it is to turn an asset into cash without affecting its market price. Monetary austerity is used instead of letting the market adjust to the rising price of labor that results from labor-friendly market conditions. This type of austerity is used to crush growing labor power by manufacturing a recession. These recessions are created by the central banks and their use of interest rate hikes when labor-friendly market conditions emerge. It can be argued that independent central banks exist primarily for this purpose. Industrial austerity is the least well-known type of economic austerity. Under industrial austerity, institutions and laws that protect workers are weakened and destroyed. This type of austerity includes creating laws that benefit employees, employers, such as the right to work laws that undermine labor unions. It includes laws that inhibit the ability of unions to fight for fair labor practices. It includes tolerating abusive behavior by employers by ignoring unfair labor practices and non-compete clauses in contracts. It includes destroying unemployment benefits so that workers cannot risk losing their jobs. The goal of all three types of economic austerity is to crush organized labor so it cannot protect workers, protects capital accumulation, and protects the class-based capital order. The outcome of economic austerity is multifaceted. The primary outcomes are the maintenance of the class-based capital order that capitalism requires to survive, and the destruction of organized labor that would challenge the political and economic supremacy of the 1% and their minions. The secondary effects are legion. These effects include growing wealth inequality, which has now grown so large that it is greater than that of the Gilded Age. They include the destruction of social programs, services, and institutions that most people rely on, such as healthcare, education, unemployment insurance, disability benefits, social housing, income support, libraries, and so much more. They include an ideological shift towards fascism as desperation grows, which undermines democracy and paves the way for violence. This leads to a loss of social cohesion and intolerance for difference. These effects also include mass homelessness, children going hungry, and seniors unable to survive. The world we live in today has been living under an economic austerity regime since the 1970s with the introduction of neoliberalism, which is an economics theory that simply recreated the market fundamentalism of the classical economics and the economic austerity introduced after World War I that paved the way for World War II. Economic austerity is how the economy has been rigged so that no matter what most do, they will never be able to retire, they will never be able to move up the social ladder, and they will never know a life without the ever-present threat of homelessness and destitution looming over their heads. It is through economic austerity that the Gilded Age was rebuilt, our social infrastructure destroyed, and how our governments became bankrupt and the willing tools of the 1%. Economic austerity is a choice that keeps leading to negative outcomes for most people, their countries, and global stability. It is a choice built on lies and economic fictions created to preserve the right of capital accumulation for the smallest minority of people. For a more in-depth analysis of economic austerity, its theories, its practices, and its outcomes, the book The Capital Order by Clara E. Matty is a good place to begin.